Welcome to the Lead Defend podcast, a show designed to help you grow in faith and leadership as you navigate the stages of young adulthood. We address important faith topics and provide practical life tips, helping you build up your faith as you engage a changing culture. Now, here are your hosts.
Hey, welcome back to Lead Defend. This is Ryan and Brock. We're here with Adam Venters. Adam is the BCM campus minister at Metro BCM in Little Rock. Been here for, has it been 4 years?
Yeah, since 2017.
Crazy.
Yeah.
And you can remember the time that you came for the first time, stepped foot on UALR's campus?
I can, actually. Yeah. So I met Miss Bitt. She was, it was over Christmas break when we came. We actually met there. She kind of walked us through the building and showed us everything. And
that's cool.
That night they had like an international student gathering. So it was pretty neat.
And shortly thereafter, Adam transitioned on staff and then transitioned to being the campus minister now. Speaking of transitions happen all the time, whether it's from high school to college, middle school to high school, or college to workforce. Adam is kind of an expert on transitions, or at least we're hoping so, because Adam's here to talk to us about some principles in transition. So, Brock, before we start that, what are some things that you see are on students' minds as they transition from middle school to high school to college especially?
Yeah, middle school to high school, man, I think a lot of them are just ready to start the next phase of their life.
Sure.
They're ready to get out of the middle school, get into high school.
I was ready to be done with that pimply face.
Get rid of the acne, maybe mature a little bit. But then I think the big one is, when they're going to college, a lot of them see for the first time, I've got some freedom.
Yeah.
Mom and dad aren't around anymore. They're not looking over my shoulder. And then even more so when they leave college, kind of starting life.
Yep, that's true. So, Adam, tell us about transitions. Like, what are some principles that we should be thinking about in times of transition?
Yeah, so like we've just kind of said, right now it's for a lot of people, summer is a lot of transitions. Like, most apartment complexes start their leases for the year in summer because so many people are moving out, moving in. And so I'm not an expert on transitions, even though I've done transitions in my life.
You have moved a lot, actually.
I have moved a lot. At one point in time, me and my wife had lived in two major cities. We lived in New Orleans before we moved to Little Rock. We had two kids. So we have two boys, Bo and Rigby, and they're 13 months apart. And we had 7 jobs in less than 2 years.
Wow.
And so it was... I've had a lot of transitions in my life.
Sure.
I don't know that makes me an expert.
Well, you're still alive.
Yeah,
so.
I'm still alive. I've navigated through it. There's a few things. So I have recently been thinking about this. And Proverbs, I don't know, how familiar people are with the Proverbs. Some people just read them straight through, and they have these little pithy statements. But Proverbs is actually a really helpful book for any young adult, I think. And the reason why, Proverbs, Job, and Ecclesiastes are kind of the 3 major books of wisdom. And I don't necessarily have like a super formal definition of wisdom, but I do have a definition that's really helpful for people to think about. Like, wisdom is the thing that keeps you from doing the thing before you have to say that you're sorry.
That's a good word.
And so sometimes a little bit more.
Okay, you got to repeat that. Wisdom is the thing.
The thing that keeps you from doing the thing before you have to say that you're sorry.
Okay.
So there's two kind of like developments.
So wisdom is the thing that would stop me from making that dumb comment
Keeps
to
you
my
out of
wife.
trouble.
Yeah. So actually, how I say this is like it's the thing that keeps you from having to say you're sorry because you did something stupid.
Okay.
But a lot of parents don't like that, so
Yeah,
I kind of cut out the
that's fair.
stupid part.
They're transitioning. They don't got to worry about parents.
Yeah, they don't have to worry about parents now. Yeah. But so
Not
a lot
true.
of people, or sometimes if you just think about wisdom, sometimes we think about like monetary wisdom, like what's the wisdom that I need in this particular moment, and that's helpful. The Bible does talk about those situations some, like how do you interact with God in a moment where you need. Most of the time, those are like crisis type moments.
Sure.
But most of wisdom, by and large, is actually meant to kind of keep you from crisis moments outside of just some major things.
Yeah.
So it's like a way of this would be
That is an interesting dichotomy, though, because I think, I need wisdom because I'm really stressed right now. But wisdom truly keeps you from stressing about everything.
Right. A thing that would be wise if you just think about your life. This is an easy example. Like, wisdom is knowing that in order for my body to stay healthy, I have to work out or eat properly. And so when I don't work out,
Not good at wisdom.
So when I don't work out or eat properly, it causes me to be a little bit more overweight. You know what I mean? Or it causes my emotional chemical balances to be off, and so that causes me to be more stressed at times, which can then lead to me like lashing out at people or projecting my own insecurities or frustrations, and then you have to say sorry. You know what I mean? Like on the back end. So wisdom would tell you it's healthy for your life to work out and eat healthy, so work out and be healthy. That would be the wisdom, the wise way of going to look at it. There's a lot of similar illustrations to that, but that's kind of the way wisdom works.
Sure.
And so in Proverbs, one of the things that's helpful, so in chapters 1 through 9, so the whole book is 31 chapters long, versus chapters 1 through 9 serve as like a literary unit.
Yeah.
And so meaning that they're all connected and they're developed in a chiasm, which you can cut that out. That doesn't matter. But actually, starting in chapter 10, it opens up a development from 10 through 31, where the main metaphor that's being driven in that particular section is a Hebrew word called haderek, which means the way. So it kind of takes on this analogy of like a path or a road, but you're heading down a particular in a particular direction. And so
like the Mandalorian, this is the way.
Yeah, this is the way. Yeah, you can Mandalorian.
Some student pastor's listening to this and just has a series on Proverbs. For the
He's
rest
like,
of the,
dude, I know what I'm teaching now.
Thank you, Lead Defend Podcast.
So there's a few. So I wrote an article that had 21 kind of principles for transition out of Proverbs 10.
Yeah.
I think the statistic that I had from Proverbs chapter 10 through chapter 22, there's some 316 bits of wisdom that are there. So Proverbs has a lot of wisdom in it. And so, but just trying to make that bite-sized, how can we take that and make it usable and pliable to us? And so Proverbs chapter 10 actually serves as the hinge. So it's opening up this idea of the way, or the way that we're going to go. And it starts by kind of using a really, really simple analogy. It says, a wise son brings joy to his father, but a foolish son grieves his mother. And so when I was working through this, one of the key things I think that's really, really helpful for any person that's going through a transition, sometimes when we go through transitions, especially from high school to college, it's easier for us, like we experience some new level of freedom, and it kind of heightens our sense of individualism. That we're our own person.
Sure.
And you are to a particular degree, but what the Proverbs would try to remind us is it's assumed now that the son is going off, if that makes sense. So what are the choices that he's going to make? Well, he's going to make choices, and what the proverb writer would say is that when he makes wise choices, it makes his father glad, and when he makes foolish choices, it makes his mother sad.
Wow.
And so it kind of connects. It's called it's a part to a whole analogy.
Sure.
But it's kind of helping us remember, like as we transition, that we are a part of a larger unit of people. And which I think is really helpful for like high school and college students.
Yeah, I mean, because when I think about that, every time you transition is a time to obtain more freedom in a sense, because even when you transition from one job to the next, it's, you're unleashing yourself from the obligations of this job, and you can kind of create this one how you want it, or fulfill obligations in a new way. And so the transition from high school to college, it really is this open world that you can kind of continue to do what you want, or you can restrain yourselves in some ways.
Yeah. And so I was thinking about, what are some of the ways, like what would be the reason why you would restrain yourself, or what would be the reason why you would allow yourself to only do certain things?
Yeah.
Everything that we do is a limitation process. Like when I graduated from college, when I went to New Orleans to start my graduate school, I applied at 3 particular jobs as a hotel clerk, because I was thinking like, what job would complement graduate school? I was thinking like working a desk at a hotel. The first 3 jobs that I applied for, I've never gotten a letter like this back since then. But they sent me letters saying that I was overqualified for the job. I was like, wait, what? I've worked this. I got 128 hours, spent tens of thousands of dollars in college to be overqualified for a job. You know what I mean?
The job that I want.
Let me determine whether or not I'm qualified.
I was just like, come on, man. And then but it stood out to me. Every single thing that we do in our life is a type of limitation to us. So like we're here right now in this studio filming and recording and that kind of stuff. And that means that we're not doing other things.
Sure.
So what the writer of Proverbs would say is like, okay, since everything is a limitation process, what are the things that you're going to limit yourself to do that's going to allow you to grow?
Wow.
And so the way that it uses this in Proverbs,
And that's a very conscientious decision. Like you have to decide what you're going to limit yourself to.
Right. No, I think that's 100%. Well, the writer of Proverbs, all throughout the Bible, like the idea of us just living and just we wake up that day and we decide, okay, this is what I'm going to do in this very moment, and that's the best decision for me.
Yeah, just living loose and free.
Yeah, it's not that. It's like that's almost a misplaced idea.
Yeah.
A little bit. It's not that you couldn't live like that, but actually the thing that allows you to live best like that, the Proverbs would say, would be the fear of God.
Wow.
Where when you have the fear of God behind you, like so if you fear God and you wake up that morning and you're not dead or you're not somewhere else, that means God's got a purpose and a plan for you right there and that very moment. You know what I mean? And not other places and other ways.
Right, and we're actually more free when we realize those healthy boundaries that God's put in our lives. I think of my daughter, like when she plays in the fence in the backyard, she has free reign of that, but if she gets outside of the fence, she can get run over by a car, she can get kidnapped, and so the limitations that God puts on our lives actually help us to live life better.
Yeah.
I'm just still laughing at the fact that he said when you wake up and you're not dead. So
yeah, you know what I mean? You wake up and you're not dead. Like, okay, so I got a purpose today, you know, whatever. There's something for me to do that God would design. And so with that, so if you kind of take that analogy, so like the choices that we make will delight our fathers. Bad choices grieve our mothers. So it kind of helps, okay, my life is just more than my life.
Yeah.
So then the decision is, well, so how do I grow? And actually, so in the Proverbs, in wisdom literature, the New Testament actually picks up on this idea of there's wise things that we can do. And Jesus specifically kind of quotes back like this idea of growing a lot. And he specifically gets it out of Matthew 5:16, where it says, let your light shine before others so they may see your good deeds and glorify your Father in heaven.
Yeah.
So if you kind of work it back to front, they may see your good deeds, meaning that you've chosen to do things and they would be resolved in the community. So people would look at those and say that they're good. And this is super silly, but it also means that they're not bad.
Yeah.
So like people observably see that you're making decisions that are good, not just for you, but for everybody. And then in that particular passage, so when you make wise choices, good choices, the community of people can reflect on those. And then in that moment, it glorifies your Father who's in heaven. So it's an observable fact that our Father allows us to make decisions to help us to understand what good decisions are, and that, based on a whole, is really helpful and positive.
So one of the principles of transition is you're part of something larger. So what are some other things that could guide us in transition?
Yeah, so there's three. So verse 1, I think, was a really helpful one that I pulled out. Verse 2, actually, the next verse is a really helpful one, too. It says, ill-gotten treasures are of no value, but righteousness delivers us from death. Verse 3, the Lord does not let the righteous go hungry, but he thwarts the cravings of the wicked. And so there's a lot to say here. I think simply you could put at least this, that righteousness for our lives is the best kind of security.
Wow.
Meaning that, so kind of we'll break down the two metaphors that are there. So righteousness. The word that sits there is also the word for right standing, and it should bring in this idea of like a courtroom. So like what would allow you to be able to stand upright in front of a judge, and that judge, like if you're standing upright, it means that you're not guilty, or he would set you free, or you're not condemned. So what would allow you to rightfully stand in front of a judge? And so the Proverbs in this particular bit would say that ill-gotten treasures are of now no value, but righteousness delivers us from death. So when we're right before God, and I think an easy way of saying that, whenever instead of our treasures, like the things that we value, put in other things or placed in other things or gained from other things, like our treasures are found in God.
Yeah.
So like I see this a lot.
So give us some examples of ill-gotten treasures.
Yeah.
What are they?
So I see this a lot with college students, and you'll see it with high school students and middle school students too. Some of them, when they come to college, what they'll do is they'll have a major chosen. And most college students, if they're like mine, they pick their major based on a job that they think they could get, that they Googled how like salaries.
What the paycheck is.
Yeah, you know what I mean? And that's how they
Except for teachers. For some reason, people still wind up being teachers. So.
Yeah, that's just a noble cause.
Yep,
you know?
I guess, yeah.
But in that, that's the way they go about their life. And on some level, there's nothing wrong with that particular deal. But there's something about whenever it works not that way, but backwards. So like, it's not bad to be like an accountant at a firm or a CFO or something like that. But if you're doing that to gain a paycheck that allows you to live your life however you want to, so that you can make a lot of money, that leads to students oftentimes switching their majors a million different times because there's no lasting value in that particular path.
Sure.
If that makes sense. But what God would say is the path of righteousness that leads us to good treasure would be when you're considering what God has put you on the earth for, when he's placed you inside of his mission, and you're thinking about your life being leveraged for that mission.
Yeah.
And how does your skill set and God working in your life, where do those two places intersect?
Wow.
Frederick Buechner has this famous quote where the world's greatest need and our greatest passion intersect is where our calling in life is. And so I think in the Proverbs, I think it brings that out. But I think picking our majors, like I don't think it's wrong for anybody to be a nurse, but whenever or a teacher or a doctor or whatever, but when there's no prayer to that, like they're not praying about, God, what do you want out of my life? They're just picking it based on dollars and values and what their parents did or whatever. It's not a lasting treasure. Does that make sense?
Yeah. And there are different reasons people may pick it. Teacher, 100%. Because you get summers off, but if it's not an intentional, okay, God's leading me, or I'm sensing or trying to follow what God's desire for me is, then it's a treasure that you're storing up for yourself.
Yeah, and so I'll say this next part. I think there's two other ones I thought of that are really practical. I think it's the scholarships that you have while you're in college, and the jobs that you work while you're in college.
Sure.
So let's go with scholarships. So there was a girl in our ministry, super, super smart, name's Ruby. She had the opportunity to do this scholarship that was tied into UALR with medical biological research. I can't remember exactly what it was called, but it was just that she was going to do research to kind of help advance the medical field in some particular kind of way. But if she did that, I remember her telling me this, it would eliminate her from being on BCM leadership. It wouldn't eliminate her from being involved with us.
Sure.
But she was going to have to take a step back because it just required more hours.
Sure.
And I remember her sending me that and saying, hey, can I meet with you tomorrow so we can pray about this?
Wow.
I think this might be something that God wants me to do, but I don't want to neglect like my spiritual responsibility on this campus.
Yeah.
And so I remember us praying through that and her just saying like at the end of that, it really was the opportunity that she should take. But sometimes, man, we take all kinds of just random opportunities just to make money or just to get by. And there's a famous guy, or he wrote a book, Jim Collins, it's called Good to Great. But one of the quotes that I gained from that book is the enemy of the great thing for your life is doing a bunch of good things.
Good things.
Yep.
Yeah. And so scholarships are one of those, and I think jobs are the other thing.
Yeah.
Man, your time can be sucked into this vortex when you're in college specifically of a job. And employers will always want more of your time, you know what I mean, than you have sometimes.
100%.
And it will cause you, if you're not balanced in your life, if you don't treasure or value the right things, you'll be offset.
Yeah, you'll give yourself away to something that is not meaningful long term.
Yeah. So what are some of the things they should treasure? So we kind of talked about what are the pitfalls, what are the ill-gotten treasures. What do you think are some things that they need to prioritize, kind of like that young lady that you just mentioned did, that maybe a lot of college students don't think about?
Yeah, I think there's 4 specific things that I think they should treasure, like the worship of God, the discipleship that can be gained through somebody investing in them and them investing in somebody else. I think they should treasure the mission of God. So how is God working in the places where they live, they work, and they play at? And then what's like a global mission experience they can have in college that gets them outside of their daily sphere? And then the last one is fellowship. So I think, and I was working through this actually the other day with a student. If you give 10% of your week, it's about 16 hours of your time to God. Well, you talk about, do quiet times every day, it's about 2 hours. If you go to worship, on a Sunday morning, it's an hour and a half kind of deal. If you have somebody invest in you and you invest in somebody else, that's about 4 hours. If you're trying to intentionally evangelize, it doesn't. It's kind of hard to intentionally evangelize all the time. Some weeks you might get a lot of opportunities. Sometimes you might not get none. So it comes out to about 8 hours of that. So what do you do with the other 16 if you were?
Yeah.
And it really stood out to me that I think one of the things that a lot of college students or just students in general need to treasure is friendships.
Yeah.
Like they need to really invest their time, not in like their work all the time or like their scholarships or studies or whatever, but spending intentional time with their friend. And they don't have to do a Bible study, you know what I mean? Like
sometimes just hanging out.
Yeah, just hanging out, man. Having good, godly community.
I think sometimes,
is a huge
man,
treasure.
we focus so much on networking those friends who are going to help us get ahead in our career.
Yeah.
We don't network and build friendships with those people who are going to get us to the next stage of maturity in our lives.
Yeah.
So point number 1 is you're part of something bigger. Point number 2 is really focus on the right things. Righteousness, restate that, would you?
Yeah, so righteousness is the best security.
Righteousness is the best security.
Satisfied in God, I think.
And then quickly give us that third point.
Yeah, so in verse 9 it says, the man of integrity walks securely, but he who takes the crooked path will be found out.
Wow.
And it's and so this was the point that kind of stood out to me, is when we walk like before, like in righteousness, when we're walking properly before the Lord, what it keeps us from doing is hiding things. Mm-hmm. So when we have nothing to hide, it also means we have nothing to fear.
Wow.
And so
nothing to hide, nothing to fear.
Nothing to hide, nothing to fear. So when we're transparent with our lives, when we're transparent with our lives to the Lord, and we're allowing not the fear of other things, like if I was scared of what you thought about me, I would be very careful about the words that I used. I would be very careful with the stories that I shared, those kind of things. But when I fear God, and I allow him to make me transparent to the people, the proper people, it allows for the Proverbs 27:17, where iron sharpens iron and one man sharpens another. So like the idea for your spiritual growth is actually to be heated up to where you're so hot, and then you can be beaten into submission. Yeah. So who are you going to allow to beat you into submission? Metaphor, you know what I mean? Yeah. Like who are you going to allow to like work on those hard places of your character? And so, but when you're hiding things, it creates insecurity, it creates a lot of fear and other stuff. And so, but when we walk transparently, you walk transparently in the Lord, nothing to hide, nothing to fear.
Wow, that's a good word. So we're part of a bigger community. Righteousness is the best security. Mm-hmm. And then when you have nothing to hide, you have nothing to fear. Yeah. So man, that's a good word. For all of you going through transitions or thinking about the transitions that are looming in your future, just bookmark this, like highlight this, listen to it, and think through like, God, how can you use this transition to better me and to glorify you? Hey, until next time, this has been Lead Defend.
That's it for this episode of Lead Defend. To hear more episodes from the Lead Defend crew, visit absc.org/podcasts. If you liked what you heard, rate and review us on your favorite podcast listening site. Want to learn more information about the next Lead Defend conference? Visit leaddefend.org.